Why I stopped trying to be strong all the time after 70. They called me strong. For years, that's the word people used when they didn't know what else to say. You're so strong. Sometimes they said it with admiration. Other times, with relief, more like my strength gave them permission to fall apart. And for a long time, I wore it like a badge. Strong meant dependable. Strong meant steady. Strong meant quiet. I was the one who held things together when everyone else was coming undone. But no one asked what that strength was costing me. I don't remember the exact moment it cracked. It didn't come with some dramatic breakdown or loud explosion. It came quietly, the way real things often do. A missed appointment, a forgotten birthday, a sigh I didn't catch in time, a long, aching pause after someone asked, "Are you okay?" And I realized I didn't have the energy to pretend anymore. Was 70. I'd been holding everything up for decades, for my family, my friends, even strangers. And I suddenly found myself wondering, who was holding me? The truth is, I didn't know who I was without my strength. I didn't know how to sit in my own softness without guilt or shame. I didn't know how to say I need help or I'm tired or I don't know how to keep going without immediately trying to spin it into something productive. But as I stepped into my 70s, something changed. Maybe it was time. Maybe it was wisdom. Maybe it was the quiet voice inside that had been waiting patiently for years. Whatever it was, I finally let the armor fall. Not all at once, but piece by piece. And when I did, I didn't fall apart. I fell into something deeper. This isn't a story about weakness, it's a story about wholeness. About learning that being strong all the time isn't the goal, being real is. About discovering that my worth never came from how much I could carry, but from how honestly I could show up. So no, I didn't stop being strong. I just stopped pretending that strength looked like silence, self-sacrifice, and solitude. I stopped being the version of myself that never needed anything. And, in doing so, I found a version of myself I never knew existed. One that could finally breathe, rest, and begin again. Growing up, I learned early that emotions were something you tucked away neatly, like folding laundry before guests arrived. You could feel pain, sure, but only behind closed doors. Tears weren't forbidden, but they were inconvenient. And in my generation, being strong wasn't just encouraged, it was expected, especially if you were the dependable one. The rock, the provider, the caretaker. And I played the part. I learned to hold it together in front of everyone. Through heartbreak, through death, through disappointment, through decades of doing without while making sure others had what they needed. I was praised for being composed, stoic, always so strong. But I wish someone had told me back then that silence can rot a person from the inside out. I didn't realize it at the time. I thought I was doing the right thing, being reliable, being mature. But year after year, stuffing everything down began to hollow me out. Every time I wanted to cry and didn't. Every time I wanted to scream but smiled instead. Every time I needed to say this hurts but swallowed the words and changed the subject. The world didn't fall apart, no. But a part of me did. I didn't even notice how emotionally numb I had become until I couldn't remember the last time I had felt true joy or true grief. Everything was muted. And for a while, I thought that was just what aging meant. But it wasn't. It was the weight of all the feelings I had never allowed myself to feel. I had made a cage out of my own silence. And the cruelest part? People thought I was fine. They thought I was so put together. And maybe I was, from the outside. But on the inside, I was disappearing. Slowly, quietly. I had taught everyone how to treat me. I had taught them that I was the strong one, the one who didn't need help, the one who never needed comforting. So they stopped asking. They stopped checking in. And I couldn't blame them. I had built that image brick by brick. But bricks get heavy when you carry them alone. One night, not long after I turned 70, I sat alone in my living room with the TV on low and a cup of cold tea in my hand. And for no obvious reason, I broke down. No warning, no big trigger, just something inside me finally giving way. I didn't even cry hard. It was a quiet weeping, the kind that comes from deep down, the kind that says, I can't hold this alone anymore. And in that moment, for the first time in decades, I whispered the words I never let myself say out loud. I'm tired of being strong. It was the beginning of a long unraveling and a long overdue healing. I used to think asking for help was the first step toward losing control, that once you admitted weakness, the whole foundation of who you were might collapse. For me, it wasn't pride exactly. It was fear dressed as pride. Fear of becoming a burden. Fear of being seen differently. Fear of no longer being the person others could count on. I thought strength meant self-sufficiency, that real adults, real grown-ups took care of their business, carried their pain quietly, figured things out alone. And to be fair, I had managed that way for a long time, decades even. But slowly the cracks started to show. Little things at first. Trouble lifting a box. Trouble understanding a form at the doctor's office. Struggling with grief on anniversaries and not knowing who to talk to. Not big, dramatic moments, just small, persistent reminders that I was human. Still, I resisted. Even when my body asked for rest, I told it to keep moving. Even when my heart asked for company, I stayed silent. Even when someone offered help, I smiled and said, I'm fine. But I wasn't. And the harder I worked to maintain the illusion, the more isolated I felt. Then came the moment I'll never forget. I was standing on a stepladder reaching for something in the garage. I lost my balance. Nothing too serious. I caught myself. But I sat down afterward, hands trembling, heart pounding, and thought, why am I still trying to do everything alone? That night I picked up the phone and called my daughter, not for an emergency, not because I needed something urgent. I just told her, I think I could use a hand with some things. She didn't act surprised. She didn't guilt-trip me. She said, of course, I've been waiting for you to say that. Something in me cracked, but it didn't feel like breaking. It felt like a dam releasing water that had been held too long. From there, it got easier. I started asking for rides to appointments. I admitted when I was confused about a bill or worried about a symptom. I told friends when I was having a hard day. I let myself lean, just a little, on the people who loved me. And instead of making me feel small, it made me feel connected. Asking for help didn't make me weak, it made me brave. It didn't lessen me, it brought me back to life. It didn't take away my dignity. It reminded me I still mattered enough for others to show up. And you know what I learned? People don't want you to be perfect. They want you to be real. The people who love you don't think less of you. When you ask for help, they feel closer to you. They feel trusted. I wish I had unlearned this lesson sooner, but I'm glad I learned it at all. Because now, in this season of life, I know this much is true. Real strength isn't how much you can carry. Real strength is knowing when it's time to set something down and letting someone help you hold what's left. There's something no one warns you about when you spend a lifetime being the strong one. Your body will eventually say what your mouth refuses to. I had gotten so good at pretending everything was fine, I actually started believing it, or at least I wanted to. For decades, I brushed off stress like it was nothing. I powered through loss, grief, exhaustion. I kept myself busy so I wouldn't have to feel too much. I thought emotions were optional and physical health was just about keeping up your appointments and taking your vitamins. But the body has a memory and a voice of its own. It started with small things. Tension in my shoulders that didn't go away. Stomach aches that came and went with no clear reason. Sleep that was shallow and restless. Then came the fatigue. Not just tiredness. Bone-deep fatigue. A kind of weariness that no nap could fix. Doctors ran tests. Nothing dramatic showed up. Stress, they said. Maybe anxiety, they suggested. But I didn't feel anxious. I wasn't panicking. I wasn't crying in public or breaking down. I was calm. I was fine, wasn't I? Then one day I sat down to eat and couldn't finish my meal. Not because I wasn't hungry, but because something felt heavy inside me. Not physical, emotional. A pressure, a sadness I couldn't name. I put my fork down, looked around the empty room and realized I hadn't been honest with myself in years, and my body knew it. The backaches, the stomach, pain, the exhaustion, they weren't just age creeping in. They were the cost of emotional suppression. My body had been carrying all the feelings I had refused to name. All the times I said, "I'm fine," when I wasn't. All the grief I pushed down, all the anger I swallowed, all the fear I dismissed, started to pay attention. When I felt a tightness in my chest, I asked what it was trying to tell me. When I got headaches, I noticed whether I had said yes to something I didn't want to do. When my legs felt heavy, I asked whether I was carrying something I no longer needed to. I began to speak more, not just to others, but to myself. I started journaling again. I prayed more slowly. I gave myself permission to cry even if no one was watching. I talked to a counselor for the first time in my life, and I only wish I had done it sooner. My body didn't betray me. It loved me enough to speak when I wouldn't. And once I listened, it didn't need to shout anymore. Now I check in with myself, not just physically, but emotionally. I no longer ignore pain and call it aging. I no longer see discomfort as weakness. I see it as a message, an invitation to slow down and pay attention. We often think strength is about pushing through. But sometimes real strength is found in the pause, in the breath, in the quiet moment when you finally ask your body, "What have I been holding in?" And you wait long enough to hear the answer. One of the deepest fears I carried was this: if I let people see the full truth of me, the tired parts, the hurting parts, the not-so-together parts, they'll love me less. So I built a version of myself for others to interact with. Reliable, upbeat, capable, unbothered. Even in the closest relationships, in my children, my siblings, my spouse when he was still alive, I filtered what I shared. I didn't want to worry them. I didn't want to seem needy. I didn't want to become the one people had to take care of, so I kept my struggles tidy and internal. But here's what I never realized. By shielding others from my pain, I was also shielding them from me. I thought I was protecting my relationships by not burdening them. But in truth, I was starving them of intimacy. The people who loved me couldn't fully reach me, because I kept parts of myself behind glass. It all changed one night when I sat across from my daughter and for the first time in a long time, said something completely unfiltered. "I don't feel strong anymore," I told her, "and I'm scared of what's coming next." I braced myself. For pity, for discomfort, for a quick subject change. Instead, she reached across the table and held my hand. "You don't have to be strong for me," she said. "I just want you to be real." That moment broke something open. I began speaking more honestly. I told my son how lonely I'd been since his dad passed. I told my neighbor I was tired of pretending I was okay. I told a longtime friend that I'd been hurting for years, and they cried with me, not out of pity but relief. Relief that I was finally letting them in. What surprised me most wasn't that people accepted my vulnerability. It was how they responded with their own. My honesty made space for theirs. My cracks gave them permission to show their own. Instead of breaking my relationships, vulnerability wove them closer together. I learned that being open isn't about being dramatic or emotionally messy. It's about letting someone see behind the mask. It's about telling the truth without needing to fix it or make it prettier than it is. Some conversations were raw. Some led to silence. But all of them were real. And that reality became the foundation for the kind of love I hadn't known I was missing. A love that sees all of you and stays anyway. If you're scared that opening up will drive people away, I want you to know this. The people who really love you, who truly want to walk with you, they're not waiting for your perfection. They're waiting for your presence, your honesty, your humanness. And when you finally stop performing strength You just might find the kind of connection you were longing for all along. Vulnerability didn't break my relationships, it brought them to life. There's a kind of mourning that doesn't come with funerals or flowers. No one brings casseroles or offers quiet condolences, but it still cuts deep. It's the grief of letting go of the version of yourself you spent a lifetime trying to uphold. For me, it was the version everyone admired, the one who never crumbled, never faltered, never asked for help. The strong one. The one who carried the weight without complaint, who held the family together during holidays, who smiled even when her heart was breaking. I thought I was supposed to be that woman forever. I thought that's who I had to be. And when I finally admitted I couldn't do it anymore, not in the same way, not with the same unshakable face, I felt like I was betraying her, like I was walking away from someone I had promised to protect. But what I didn't see right away was that she had already been carrying too much for too long. She had done her job. She had made sure others had what they needed. She had held it all together when no one else could. She had been strong in a world that expected her to be, even when she wanted to fall apart. And now, it was time to let her rest. I cried a lot during that time, not because I was sad to grow old, but because I was finally acknowledging how heavy it had all been, how much I had suppressed, how many times I said yes when I wanted to say no, how many nights I lay awake trying to fix problems that weren't mine to solve. I mourned the years I spent trying to be everything to everyone. I mourned the moments I missed because I was too busy being strong. I mourned the softness I buried in order to survive. But with grief comes clarity, and as I let go of that version of myself, the woman I thought I had to be, I began to see the woman I actually was underneath. Tender, curious, tired, yes, but also wiser, softer, more honest. I began to understand that growth doesn't always look like building up. Sometimes it looks like breaking open. I forgave myself for all the times I didn't know better. I stopped chasing the approval that once defined me, and I started asking new questions. What if I don't have to hold it all anymore? What if I'm allowed to change? What if letting go is the beginning of becoming whole? There's a sacred kind of strength in grieving who you thought you had to be, and choosing instead to become who you were always meant to be. And that grief? It gave me back to myself. There's a kind of power that doesn't announce itself, it doesn't shout, it doesn't posture. It doesn't need to dominate a room or win every argument. It moves quietly, softly, like morning light through a curtain, like a steady hand, in the middle of chaos. I didn't grow up thinking gentleness was power. In fact, I was taught the opposite. I thought strength meant being firm, sharp, efficient. Keep it moving. Get things done. Don't take things personally. Don't be too sensitive. Don't let anyone see your cracks. But in my 70s, something inside me shifted. Maybe it was time. Maybe it was the sheer exhaustion of trying to be unbreakable. Or maybe, finally, I was wise enough to stop chasing the kind of strength that made me feel more distant than alive, and I began to experiment with something radical: gentleness. It started small. I stopped criticizing myself in the mirror. I stopped rushing through breakfast. I began speaking to myself the way I would to a friend, not with judgment but with kindness. You're doing your best. It's okay to rest. You're allowed to feel this. I slowed down. I paid attention to how I spoke to others, especially those I loved. I stopped trying to fix their problems and started offering my presence instead. I said, "That sounds hard," more than, "Here's what you should do." And the more gentle I became, the more I noticed something remarkable. People leaned in, not because I was loud, but because I was safe. I didn't realize how much gentleness the world was starving for, especially in older people. We're told to be tough, to fight aging, to stay sharp and quick and relevant. But what if the most relevant thing we can be is tender? What if our softness is the very thing that heals? I began to let go of my need to be right. I stopped apologizing for taking up space. I started enjoying quiet mornings with my tea, not as unproductive time, but as sacred pauses. I watered my plants with the same care I began to offer myself. I let people help me. I let myself feel. I even let myself cry in front of others. Not to make a scene, but because holding it in no longer served me. Gentleness doesn't mean weakness. It means trust. It means grace. It means knowing your worth so deeply that you no longer need to prove anything. The world will always value noise and speed, but in my life now I value softness, stillness, warm hands, slow breaths, the kind of strength that doesn't need armor to exist. This gentleness, it's not the opposite of strength. It's the evolution of it. And in it, I have found the most powerful version of myself yet. There was a time when I believed my usefulness ended when I stopped working, when my kids moved out, when I couldn't carry 100 things at once or keep the calendar full. I thought that when I stepped out of the spotlight, professionally, socially, even in my family, I was stepping out of meaning, out of relevance. And yet something beautiful happened after I let go of all that. I started noticing how people watched me, not for what I did, but for how I was. They watched how I moved through pain without turning bitter, how I greeted strangers with kindness even when I was tired, how I took joy in small things, my garden, a sunset, the quiet click of a teacup on a saucer, how I allowed myself to rest without apology. My grandchildren especially taught me this truth without saying a word. They didn't care that I wasn't strong enough to lift them anymore. They didn't care that I didn't understand TikTok or couldn't always keep up with their stories. What they noticed was that I listened, that I asked questions, that I didn't rush them, that I was there. That presence became my new form of teaching. I no longer pass on lessons in the form of lectures or advice. I pass them on in how I live, how I love, how I forgive, how I laugh, especially at myself. I used to think I had to be in control to lead. But now I know the most powerful lessons we teach often come when we let go, when we allow people to see us not just in our strength, but in our softness. It's in how I speak gently to myself after making a mistake, and let others witness that grace. It's in how I name my limits instead of pretending I have none. It's in how I model humility, presence, and emotional honesty. Not just for the young, but for everyone still learning to be human. I don't teach by being unshakable anymore. I teach by being real. I am still a guide. Not because I have every answer, but because I'm finally brave enough to live without needing them all. I walk ahead, not to lead the way, but to remind others that the path softens if you stop trying to conquer it and instead learn to walk with it. Maybe that's what wisdom really is, not a louder voice, but a quieter soul. Looking back now, I don't see a trail of failure or missed opportunities. I see a journey, one where I carried more than I needed to, for longer than I should have, because I thought that was the only way to survive. But I know better now. I didn't stop being strong after 70. I stopped performing strength. I stopped pretending I had to hold everything and everyone together at all times. And in doing that, I discovered a different kind of power. One that runs deeper. One that isn't conditional on productivity, youth, or perfection. I found the strength that comes from resting, from receiving, from admitting that I too need comfort. I need help. I need space to feel and grieve and hope and begin again. And in letting myself be seen not as a fortress but as a garden, I became more alive than I had ever been. So to anyone listening who's tired of holding it all, you can let go now. You can rest. You can cry, stumble, ask for help, say no, be soft, and still be incredibly, beautifully strong. The world might not always recognize this kind of strength, but your heart will, your body will, your soul will, and the people who matter most, they'll feel it. You don't owe the world an unbreakable version of yourself. You owe yourself honesty. You owe yourself tenderness. I didn't lose strength when I stopped trying to be strong all the time. I found the part of me that had been waiting patiently, quietly, beneath the armor, the part that knew all along. Real strength doesn't come from carrying everything. It comes from knowing what's worth carrying and daring to let the rest fall away. This is the strongest I've ever felt. And finally, it's strength that feels like freedom.